For sale cheap, the day a mysterious tribal woman shocked the entire Wild West town. The town of Red Hollow sat quietly between dry hills and wide stretches of open land. Most days passed slowly there. Dust moved gently along the main street. Horses stood tied outside wooden buildings, and people followed routines that rarely changed. Everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed quickly. Nothing surprising happened often, which was why the morning began like any other. Until someone spotted the sign. It was nailed crookedly to a wooden post outside the general store. The letters were bold and uneven, painted in dark color that had not yet dried completely. For sale cheap. At first, only a few people noticed it. Old Mr. Harris, who always arrived early to buy tobacco, stood staring at the sign with a confused expression. He scratched his beard slowly, then looked around as if expecting someone to explain the meaning. Soon others gathered, ranch hands finishing morning chores, a woman carrying fresh bread, 2 boys who should have been helping at the stables but were always curious about anything unusual. "What's for sale?" one man asked aloud. "No idea," another replied. "Maybe tools or supplies." Speculation spread quickly. Some believed it might be a broken wagon. Others guessed a horse or even land rights. In a small town like Red Hollow, news traveled faster than the wind, and mystery drew people together more than anything else. Inside the general store, Mrs. Carter stood behind the counter watching through the window. She had owned the store for years and disliked anything that disrupted the calm rhythm of business. She stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Who put that sign there?" she asked sharply. No one answered. The townspeople continued whispering, eyes fixed on the empty road that stretched toward the hills. The air felt heavy with expectation. Even the sheriff, who usually avoided unnecessary attention, leaned against a post nearby, quietly observing. Sheriff Thomas Reed was a patient man. He believed most problems solved themselves if given enough time. Still, something about the sign made him uneasy. It felt careless, almost disrespectful, as if someone had chosen words without thinking about their meaning. Time passed slowly. The sun climbed higher, warming the wooden boards beneath their boots. Just when curiosity began turning into boredom, a distant shape appeared on the road, a wagon approaching from the east. Dust rose behind it, swirling like a pale cloud. Conversation stopped. People straightened their posture, watching closely. The wagon moved at a steady pace, pulled by a tired horse. A man sat at the front, holding the reins loosely. His face was partly hidden beneath a worn hat, and he avoided looking directly at the crowd waiting for him. As the wagon rolled closer, another figure became visible behind him. A woman stood near the back, holding the side rail. She wore simple tribal clothing that looked travel-worn but carefully maintained. Her long, dark hair moved slightly in the breeze, and her expression remained calm despite the attention focused on her.
The wagon stopped near the general store. Silence fell across the street.
The man climbed down first, dusting off his coat. He glanced at the sign, then at the crowd, clearly aware of the curiosity he had created. "Well," he said loudly, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes, "looks like folks noticed. What exactly are you selling?" Mrs. Carter asked directly. The man hesitated, as if deciding how much to say. "Just offering opportunity," he replied vaguely. "Someone looking for help, maybe." His words confused people even more. Meanwhile, the woman stepped down from the wagon carefully. Her movements were controlled and graceful, not hesitant or fearful. She looked around slowly, observing faces, buildings, and surroundings with sharp awareness. Her eyes met Sheriff Reed's for a brief moment. He noticed strength in her gaze. Not anger, not fear, just quiet understanding.
"What's your name?" someone from the crowd asked.
The woman remained silent at first. Then she spoke softly but clearly. "Paula!" The name lingered in the air. Some townspeople exchanged uncertain looks. Others studied her clothing and posture, trying to understand where she came from. A few whispered judgments under their breath, while others felt simple curiosity. Daniel Mercer watched from the edge of the crowd. He was a rancher who preferred distance from gossip and attention. He had arrived in town early to buy supplies before returning to his land outside Red Hollow. Yet something about the scene kept him from leaving. He noticed details others ignored: the way Tala stood straight despite long travel, the calm way she observed everything without reacting to stares. She did not look like someone waiting to be chosen or controlled. The man who brought her continued speaking, trying to explain the situation, but his words felt unclear. "She's looking for work," he said. "Needs a place. Thought someone here might be interested." "Interested in what?" Sheriff Reed asked calmly. The man shifted uncomfortably. "Helping her out," he replied. Murmurs spread through the crowd again. Some people misunderstood the meaning of the sign, interpreting it literally, which created discomfort. Sheriff Reed stepped forward slightly, his presence reminding everyone to remain respectful. Tala watched silently, letting others speak while she listened. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried quiet strength. "I can work," she said simply. "I do not need anyone to speak for me." The statement surprised many. It changed the atmosphere instantly. Daniel felt a small sense of admiration. She had not raised her voice or shown anger, yet she had shifted control of the conversation with only a few words. Mrs. Adam never saw it after re-speaking him. Carter crossed her arms. "Well, if you're looking for honest work, there's always something needing doing," she said cautiously. A young boy stepped closer, curious. Tala smiled faintly at him, and the tension eased slightly. Still, uncertainty remained. Some townspeople felt unsure about accepting someone new, especially someone who appeared so different from their familiar world. Sheriff Reed addressed the crowd calmly. "Let's keep things respectful," he said. "Everyone deserves a fair chance." The man who brought Tala seemed impatient, as if he wanted the situation finished quickly. He glanced at the sign again, perhaps realizing its wording had caused more trouble than expected. Daniel stepped forward at last. "What kind of work can you do?" he asked Tala directly. She met his gaze without hesitation. "Many things," she replied. "Whatever is needed." Her answer carried confidence without arrogance. The sun continued climbing, and slowly the town realized that something unusual had arrived. Not just a stranger, but a moment that might change their quiet routine. No one knew it yet, but the day the mysterious tribal woman arrived would become a story repeated for years. Not because of shock or drama, but because of the quiet way she challenged assumptions and changed the way people saw one another. The morning crowd slowly broke apart after the wagon arrived, but the curiosity did not disappear. People continued to talk about the mysterious woman long after they returned to their daily work. Some spoke with excitement, others with uncertainty, and a few with quiet suspicion. Red Hollow was not used to change, and anything new felt like a ripple across still water. Tala stood near the general store while the man who brought her began unloading small bags from the wagon. She watched everything carefully, noticing how people looked at her, some friendly, some distant, some unsure. She did not react to any of it. Instead, she focused on understanding the place around her. "Mrs. Tartok." Carter handed her a small cup of water. "You look like you've come far," she said, her voice softer now. Tala nodded politely. "Thank you." The sheriff remained nearby, observing quietly. He sensed tension, but also something else: curiosity mixed with respect. Tala did not act like someone lost or helpless. She stood with calm confidence, as if she had walked through many places and learned to read people quickly. The man who brought her spoke loudly again, trying to draw attention. "Like I said, she's looking for work. Anyone interested should speak now." Daniel noticed that Tala's expression did not change, but there was a subtle firmness in her posture, as if she disliked how he spoke for her. "I speak for myself," she said calmly. The crowd fell silent again. Daniel felt impressed by her quiet strength. He stepped closer, not wanting to seem intrusive, but curious enough to ask more questions. "You know ranch work?" he asked. She considered his words carefully. "I know animals. I know land. I learn fast." Her answers were simple but clear, Daniel nodded slowly, seeing honesty in her eyes. Nearby, two men whispered to each other, unsure whether to trust someone unfamiliar. Their voices carried just enough for others to hear, creating small waves of doubt. Tala seemed to notice, but chose not to respond. Sheriff Reed stepped forward. "This town treats people fair," he said calmly. "Let's make sure everyone remembers that." The man who brought Tala shifted uncomfortably. "Well, my part's done," he said. "I delivered her safely. Now it's up to you folks."
The way he said it made Daniel uneasy.
Something about the situation felt incomplete, like a story missing important details. Tala stepped away from the wagon and walked slowly down the street. She looked at the blacksmith shop, the stable, the small bakery with warm smells drifting through open windows. Every movement showed quiet awareness, as if she was mapping the town in her mind. A young girl tripped while running nearby, dropping a basket of apples. Without hesitation, Tala knelt and helped gather them. The simple act caught the attention of several people watching from a distance. "Thank you," the girl said shyly. Tala smiled gently. "You are welcome." Moments like this began softening the atmosphere. People who had felt unsure started seeing her as a person rather than a mystery. Mrs. Carter soon asked if Tala could help carry supplies inside the store. Tala agreed immediately, moving carefully and efficiently. She worked without complaint, organizing items in a way that surprised the store owner. "You've done this before, Mrs.?" Carter observed. "I help where I go," Tala replied simply. Daniel watched quietly from outside. He noticed how naturally she adapted to tasks, never rushing, but never slowing down either. It made him wonder about her past, where she had learned such patience. Later, a ranch hand brought in a restless horse that refused to calm down. The animal stomped nervously, making it difficult to tie properly. Tala approached slowly, speaking in soft tones. She moved gently, allowing the horse to smell her hand before touching its neck. Within moments, the animal relaxed. Several people stared in surprise. "How'd you do that?" the ranch hand asked. She shrugged slightly. "Listen to what they feel." The simple explanation left many impressed. Despite these positive moments, tension still lingered. Some townspeople worried about change. Others wondered why she had arrived with that strange sign. Rumors continued growing, shaped by imagination rather than truth. Sheriff Reed decided to speak privately with the man who brought her. Their conversation happened near the edge of town, away from curious ears. Though no one heard clearly, the sheriff's serious expression afterward suggested unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Daniel approached Tala again. "You planning to stay long?" he asked. "I do not know yet," she replied honestly. "I go where I can work and live peacefully." Her words carried quiet sadness, though she did not show it openly. Daniel nodded. "Red Hollow can be quiet," he said. "Sometimes too quiet." She gave a small smile. As the afternoon passed, Tala continued helping wherever needed, carrying water, organizing tools, even showing a farmer how to prepare herbs for a sick goat. Her knowledge impressed many, slowly shifting opinions. Still, whispers followed her. A few people believed she might bring trouble simply because she was unfamiliar. Tala ignored the whispers, focusing only on actions. By evening, the town felt slightly different. Conversations turned from speculation to curiosity about her skills. Children followed her at a distance, fascinated by her calm presence. Daniel returned to his wagon but hesitated before leaving. Something about the day felt important, as if a quiet change had begun. Before sunset, Tala sat alone near the edge of town, watching the sky turn golden. Sheriff Reed approached gently. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "I have seen worse places," she replied softly. He studied her for a moment. "If anyone causes trouble, you come to me." She nodded. As darkness settled over Red Hollow, lanterns lit up along the street. The sign outside the general store still hung there, moving slightly in the evening breeze. Yet its meaning felt different now. Instead of confusion, people began understanding that Tala was not an object or a mystery to be solved. She was a person with skills, choices, and dignity. The days after Tala's arrival began to change the rhythm of Red Hollow in ways no one expected. At first, people watched her from a distance, unsure whether she would stay or disappear like many travelers before her. But each morning, she woke early and found work without waiting for permission. Slowly, curiosity turned into quiet respect. The general store became the center of activity. Mrs. Carter noticed that since Tala began helping, tasks finished faster and more smoothly. Shelves stayed organized, deliveries were sorted quickly, and customers felt more comfortable lingering to talk. Tala spoke little, but when she did, her words were thoughtful and calm. One afternoon, a worried father rushed into town carrying his young son. The boy had been sick for days, and nothing seemed to help. The local doctor was away visiting another settlement, leaving the family anxious and uncertain. People gathered nearby, whispering with concern. Tala stepped forward carefully, asking permission before approaching. She examined the child gently, observing his breathing and listening to the father's explanation. Then she requested simple items: clean water, cloth, and a few herbs that grew near the hills. Some townspeople hesitated, unsure whether to trust her methods, but the father, desperate to help his child, agreed. Tala prepared a warm drink and showed the father how to keep the boy comfortable. Her movements were steady and confident, guided by knowledge gained through years of experience. By the next morning, the child's condition improved. Word spread quickly through town. People began speaking of her not as a stranger but as someone valuable. Daniel heard the news while working at his ranch outside town. Curious, he rode back to Red Hollow earlier than planned. When he arrived, he found Tala repairing a torn saddle with careful precision. She greeted him with a small nod. "You've made quite an impression," he said lightly. She shrugged. "I only help." Daniel noticed that she never sought attention or praise. She simply did what needed to be done. As days passed, more examples of her skill appeared. A stubborn horse that refused to be handled calmed under her touch. A farmer struggling with soil problems learned new planting techniques from her advice. Even the town's children began following her around, fascinated by her quiet stories about distant lands and nature. Despite these positive changes, whispers about the sign still lingered. Some people wondered whether the story behind her arrival was fully understood. The sheriff continued his investigation, asking questions about the man who brought her and the circumstances surrounding the sign. One evening, Sheriff Reed gathered several townspeople, including Daniel, to discuss what he had learned. The man who brought Tala had exaggerated his authority over her situation, hoping to gain something from the attention. He had described her in a way that sounded like an object rather than a person, which troubled the sheriff deeply. "She came by choice," Reed explained. He only provided transport. The rest was his attempt to control the story. Daniel felt relief but also frustration. The misunderstanding had shaped how people first saw her, creating barriers that did not need to exist. Later, Daniel found Tala sitting near the edge of town, watching the sunset again. The sky stretched wide in orange, reflecting in her thoughtful eyes. "The sheriff told us more about your journey," he said gently. She nodded. "Some people speak louder than truth." There was no anger in her voice, only acceptance. "Why didn't you correct them sooner?" Daniel asked. "I wanted people to see actions, not arguments," she replied. Her answer stayed with him long after the conversation ended. As weeks passed, Red Hollow changed slowly but noticeably. People who once avoided outsiders became more welcoming. Neighbors helped each other more often, inspired by Tala's quiet example. Even Mrs. Carter admitted that business felt livelier since her arrival. Yet not everyone felt comfortable with change. A small group of influential townsmen worried that tradition might fade if new ideas spread too quickly. They met privately, discussing whether Tala's presence challenged long-standing customs. One afternoon, tension surfaced when a man questioned her methods openly in front of others. Instead of reacting defensively, Tala listened calmly, answering each concern with patience. Her respectful tone disarmed the criticism, turning potential conflict into conversation. Daniel watched the exchange with admiration. He realized that her strength came not from force, but from understanding. Meanwhile, the mysterious sign remained hanging outside the general store. Over time, its meaning shifted. What once caused confusion now served as a reminder of how quickly people judge without understanding. One day a traveler passing through town stopped to read the sign. Curious, he asked Mrs. Carter about it. "That old thing?" she said, shaking her head. "It doesn't mean what people thought." The traveler laughed softly, unaware of the deeper story behind her words. Tala continued building connections quietly. She taught children how to identify safe plants, helped ranchers prepare for changing weather, and even shared songs during evening gatherings. Her presence felt natural now, as if she had always belonged. Daniel found himself spending more time in town than usual. Their conversations grew longer, filled with simple topics: weather, animals, travel, and lessons learned from hardship. There was no rush or expectation, only growing trust. One evening during a small gathering outside the store, Tala shared a story from her past about crossing a harsh desert guided only by stars. People listened closely, captivated by her calm storytelling. The moment felt peaceful, a sign that Red Hollow had begun embracing something new. Still, a sense of anticipation lingered. Change rarely arrived without challenge, and some people sensed that the town would soon face a moment testing everything it had learned. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the dusty street, Tala stood quietly among the townspeople, no longer just a mysterious arrival, but a respected part of their community. The journey that began with misunderstanding had become something deeper, a slow transformation that reshaped how people saw one another. Life in Red Hollow had begun to feel steady again, but beneath the calm surface, something was changing. The town no longer moved exactly as it once had. People spoke more openly, worked together more often, and listened carefully when Tala shared her thoughts. Even those who once doubted her now watched with quiet respect. One warm afternoon, Daniel arrived in town earlier than usual. He noticed groups of people standing together in serious conversation. Their faces showed concern, and the usual laughter near the general store was missing. "What's happening?" he asked Mrs. Carter as he stepped inside. She lowered her voice. Word came from a passing rider. "Trouble near the outer ranches. A group of strangers moving through the area, asking questions and causing unease." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. Red Hollow had always been peaceful, but isolation also meant vulnerability. If strangers brought conflict, the town would need to stand together. Outside, Sheriff Reed gathered several ranchers and townspeople to discuss what they knew. Tala stood nearby, listening quietly without interrupting. "We don't know their intentions," the sheriff explained calmly, "but we should stay alert." Others spoke confidently, insisting the town could handle any situation. Voices rose slightly, showing how fear could quickly turn into disagreement. Tala stepped forward gently. She waited until the voices softened before speaking. "Sometimes danger is avoided not by force, but by preparation," she said calmly. The group turned toward her. "What do you suggest?" Daniel asked. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Watch the land. Know where they move before they reach you. Keep people together. No one should feel alone." Her advice felt practical rather than dramatic. Sheriff Reed nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense." The townspeople divided into small teams, watching nearby roads and ranches while continuing daily work. Instead of panic, a sense of quiet cooperation spread through Red Hollow. As evening approached, Tala walked with Daniel along the edge of town, scanning the distant hills. The sky turned orange, casting long shadows across the land. "You've seen situations like this before," Daniel said. She nodded slowly. "Travel teaches many lessons. Fear grows when people do not understand what is coming." Daniel appreciated her calm perspective. He realized that while others reacted with emotion, she focused on solutions. Over the next few days, the town remained alert. Riders reported seeing unfamiliar figures traveling between settlements but causing no direct harm. Still, uncertainty lingered, and people stayed cautious. One afternoon, a young rancher rushed into town with urgent news. A small group of strangers had approached his property, asking questions about supplies and routes. They left peacefully, but their behavior felt unsettling. Sheriff Reed gathered everyone again. This time, tension filled the air more strongly. Some wanted to confront the strangers immediately, while others preferred waiting. Tala listened quietly before speaking again. If you meet fear with anger, fear grows. If you meet it with calm strength, sometimes it passes. Instead of rushing into conflict, the town agreed to stay prepared, while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. Daniel noticed how naturally people began looking toward Tala for guidance. It was not authority given by position, but earned through trust. Days later, the strangers finally arrived near Red Hollow. They stopped outside town, observing from a distance. The townspeople stood together calmly, prepared but not aggressive. Sheriff Reed and Daniel approached carefully, with Tala walking beside them. The moment felt tense, but Tala's steady presence seemed to ease the atmosphere. After a quiet conversation, it became clear that the strangers were travelers, searching for safe passage, rather than troublemakers. Misunderstanding had created fear where none was needed. Relief spread through the town. As the travelers moved on peacefully, people began realizing how close they had come to letting fear control their actions. Tala's calm advice had prevented unnecessary conflict. That evening, Red Hollow gathered outside the general store, sharing food and stories under lantern light. The tension of recent days transformed into gratitude. Laughter returned, mixed with thoughtful reflection. Mrs. Carter approached Tala with a warm smile. "You helped us see clearly," she said. Tala shook her head gently. "You helped yourselves. You listened." Daniel watched the interaction, feeling proud of how far the town had come. He remembered the first day Tala arrived, when people stared with uncertainty. Now she stood among them as someone trusted and valued. During the gathering, Sheriff Reed spoke openly to everyone. "We learned something important," he said. "Fear grows when we judge too quickly. Today we chose patience, and it made all the difference." The crowd nodded in agreement. Later, Daniel and Tala walked along the quiet street. Lanterns glowed softly behind them, and the night air felt calm. "You changed this place," Daniel said. She looked thoughtful. "Change belongs to everyone. I only reminded people of what they already knew." Her humility impressed him deeply. Over the following weeks, Red Hollow felt stronger than ever. Neighbors supported one another more actively. People spoke kindly to travelers rather than assuming the worst. Even small disagreements resolved faster, guided by a new understanding. The old sign outside the general store still hung there, faded and worn by time. Some wanted to remove it, but others suggested keeping it as a reminder of how easily misunderstanding begins. One morning, a group of children asked Tala why she stayed in Red Hollow instead of continuing her journey. She smiled softly before answering. "Because sometimes a place chooses you as much as you choose it." Her words spread through town quickly, filling people with quiet pride. Daniel began seeing Red Hollow not just as a place of routine, but as a living community, capable of growth. Tala's presence had revealed strengths they never noticed before. As the season shifted and cooler winds arrived, the town prepared for new challenges ahead. But now they faced the future differently, not with fear of change, but with confidence in their ability to learn and adapt together. The weeks that followed brought a quiet rhythm back to Red Hollow, but something had changed forever. The town no longer felt exactly as it had before Tala arrived. People moved differently, spoke differently, and thought differently. There was a new sense of awareness in the air, as if everyone had learned to notice not only what was obvious, but also what mattered quietly beneath the surface. Tala had settled into her new life with patience and care. Each day she helped where she was needed, whether tending to animals, assisting with repairs, or offering guidance on small tasks that others overlooked. Her work was not flashy or demanding attention, but the results spoke for themselves. Ranchers began noticing their livestock healthier and calmer. Farmers saw improvements in soil and crops thanks to her advice. Even children began looking up to her not as someone foreign, but as someone they could trust and learn from. Daniel often found himself observing Tala from a distance before finally approaching. He was not sure when the admiration turned into something deeper, a quiet respect that went beyond curiosity. He liked the way she moved, steady and sure, how she listened first and acted only after understanding. It was rare to meet someone who seemed to carry knowledge, courage, and humility all at once. One morning, a caravan of traders approached the town. Their wagons were heavily loaded, and they looked weary from the long journey. Normally, such travelers might have caused minor concern, as townsfolk were wary of strangers, especially those who might cause trouble or demand resources. But today, something had shifted. Tala stepped forward calmly to greet them, speaking softly and offering guidance. Her confidence reassured the travelers. Within minutes, the town began helping them unload, organize, and settle in for a brief stay. People noticed the difference immediately. The traders commented on the unusual kindness of the townsfolk, a kindness that had grown quietly since Tala's arrival. No one acted nervously or suspiciously. They worked together naturally, guided by her example. The town had learned patience, respect, and teamwork, lessons that came not from fear or command, but from simple, steady leadership. As the day ended, the town gathered near the general store. Lanterns glowed softly, casting warm light across wooden walls and dusty streets. Children played quietly nearby, while adults exchanged stories and laughter. The mood was relaxed but thoughtful, as if everyone had realized the small ways their lives had changed. Daniel found Tala sitting near the edge of the street, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sky was painted in gold and crimson, the hills bathed in evening light. He approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt her thoughts. "You've done a lot for this town," he said gently. Tala looked at him and shook her head slightly. "I only helped where I could. People chose to listen." Daniel smiled. "Maybe, but it takes someone special to make people notice what they already have." She looked away for a moment as if reflecting on the words. Then she spoke softly. "Sometimes people only see what they need to see when they are ready." Daniel understood the meaning, realizing that her arrival had done more than teach skills. It had changed hearts. That evening, Sheriff Reed called a small meeting to acknowledge the town's progress. The sheriff rarely spoke in a way that drew attention, but today he addressed everyone with quiet pride. "We faced uncertainty," he said, "and we responded with calm, courage, and thought. That is not something that happens easily in small towns like ours. We have learned to see beyond fear, beyond first impressions. And one person helped remind us how to do it." He gestured toward Tala, who nodded modestly. The crowd clapped, not loudly or dramatically, but in a way that carried sincere respect. People realized that while she had arrived quietly, her influence had been profound. In the weeks that followed, Tala became a trusted part of the community. She helped plan the town's routines, guided families with advice on food and care, and continued to teach children about the land, animals, and simple wisdom from her travels. Her presence was calming and inspiring. People no longer whispered about the sign outside the general store. It had lost its original meaning entirely. Instead, it became a quiet reminder that assumptions can be misleading, and respect comes from understanding, not judgment. Daniel often rode out to his ranch but returned frequently to see how the town fared. His connection with Tala grew steadily, built on trust and shared experience rather than urgency or drama. He admired her for the person she was, kind, steady, thoughtful, and capable. The quiet evenings spent together, discussing life, animals, and the land became moments he cherished. One late afternoon, a group of travelers passed through Red Hollow and stopped near the general store. They spoke to townspeople asking about their experiences. People spoke freely, proud to share how the town had become stronger and more welcoming. When they asked specifically about Tala, the townsfolk smiled. "She came quietly," Daniel explained, "but she helped us see who we can be when we are patient, careful, and kind." The travelers nodded, impressed. Tala, standing nearby, smiled softly but said nothing. Her work was not for recognition, it was for action, for helping the town grow. Even as months passed, stories about the mysterious tribal woman circulated quietly in Red Hollow. Children told new arrivals about her wisdom. Adults shared lessons learned from her calm leadership. The story was no longer about shock or surprise, but about growth, understanding, and quiet courage. One evening, after a long day of helping prepare supplies for the coming winter, Daniel and Tala walked together along the edge of town. The hills glowed under the last rays of the sun, and a gentle wind carried the scent of dust and grass. "You've made this place different," Daniel said. Tala looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "Red Hollow made itself different. I only helped." He understood that she spoke the truth. Change had begun because people had listened, learned, and acted together. Her arrival had been the spark, but the town had grown through its own choices. The lanterns lit the streets that evening as the town settled into quiet activity. Families returned home. Horses were stabled, doors were closed carefully, and the night became still. Red Hollow was no longer a town that simply existed. It was a town that had learned, grown, and begun to thrive in ways it had never imagined. And Tala? She stood quietly on the edge of town, looking at the hills that stretched beyond the horizon. She had come from far away, carrying her own history, skills, and wisdom. She had not demanded recognition, but it had come naturally, flowing from her actions rather than words. The town had learned from her, and she had found a place where her presence mattered. As the stars appeared above Red Hollow, Daniel stood beside her in silence, both appreciating the calm beauty of the night. The town had faced fear, uncertainty, and misunderstanding, but it had grown stronger. Tala had arrived as a mystery, but she remained as a teacher, a guide, and a reminder that quiet courage can change lives. The story was no longer about a sign or shock, but about respect, trust, and the simple power of kindness. Travelers passing through would hear about her for years to come, and children would grow up learning lessons that might otherwise have been lost. The mysterious tribal woman had come quietly, and quietly, she had changed an entire town.